So the real question is, which one is more dangerous? Narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder? This could be in relationships, with family, but for spiritual, emotional, and mental health. We're going to go over the technical definitions, similarities, differences, and at the end of the video, I'm going to give you the pendulum model to bring it all together. This is the main reason why I pick one to be more dangerous than the other. I'm going to give you my insights based off of what I've dealt with dealing with multiple people with both narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder throughout my life, feedback from psychologists, psychiatrists, studies, and childhood trauma therapists. For those of you, if it's your first time, I welcome you. For those of you, if you're back, welcome back. My name is Joe. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, business, life, and relationship coach. For those of you that have been tuning into my videos up until this point, I thank you. Finally got into the new studio. I have John Wick behind me. Baba Yaga, which is the boogeyman in Russian, for those of you that aren't familiar. If you guys know the John Wick movies, I love him myself. He's somebody that can't be preyed upon. He's a symbol of strength, resilience, loyalty. And that's why I think him as a symbol is very important to have, especially anyone who's got those scars that's been through any emotional abuse in relationships. Anyone that's dealt with narcissism, sociopaths, borderline personality disorder, you know those scars never go away. So we're going to jump into the technical definitions of both narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. But like I said, listen to it throughout the video, put it all together so at the end I can give you the pendulum model and give you the reason why I think one is significantly more dangerous than the other. So I'm going to read the technical definition of both narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, just so there's no confusion. I don't think one size fits all with this. I think there's characteristics from both that can kind of cross over, and just because they say narcissists are supposed to act this way, they don't always. So just remember to be cautious of who you're dealing with, but just because the textbook definition word for word isn't telling you who they are, doesn't mean it's not dangerous. So, narcissistic personality disorder, a disorder in which a person has an inflated self-importance. I think we know that, that's pretty standard. Narcissistic personality disorder is found more commonly in men. True. The cause is unknown, but likely involves a combination of genetic and environmental factors. From what I've learned, it's hardwiring from childhood, and that's a whole nother aspect of what we can get into at a different video, but there's things that are hardwired to you, they call it the hardwiring phase throughout your childhood, that cause these things to come out in your adulthood. Your trauma usually doesn't come out for anywhere from 20 to 30 years sometimes. Symptoms include an excessive need for admiration, true, disregard for others' feelings, empathy. For those of you that don't know, empathy isn't the ability to feel bad for people. It's the ability to understand other people's feelings. Really connect with, if I was in their shoes, how would I feel? That's more empathy. Not like, oh, I just feel bad for you, so I'm pathetic. And the inability to handle any criticism. That can go for a lot of personality disorders, though. Sense of entitlement, that's pretty standard as well. The disorder needs to be diagnosed, blah, 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 by a professional. Yeah, we all know that too. So let's see about borderline. Borderline personality disorder, a mental disorder characterized by unstable moods, behavior, and relationships. The cause of borderline personality disorder isn't well understood. Diagnosis is made based on symptoms. Symptoms include emotional instability, feeling of worthlessness, insecurity, impulsivity, and impaired social relationships. Treatments include talk therapy or in some cases medications. Okay. Here's what's confusing about it. Because what we just read about borderline personality disorder, and that's exactly what it is, narcissistic personality disorder obviously is a personality disorder. Borderline is borderline personality disorder, exactly what it is. It's just not enough to be a personality disorder. But why this could be so confusing is because there's so many similarities in borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, but you're not quite sure where someone falls. That's really none of our business. But there is one main difference that we're going to get into after we bring up the similarities that's really going to clarify the difference. And this is something that I learned from a childhood trauma therapist, one of the best in the country, when I was dealing with my childhood. So technically a personality disorder is a mental health condition in which someone's personality, their beliefs about themselves, and their actions towards others interfere with interpersonal relationships in everyday life. Makes it harder to function. If you notice a lot of these people, it works again, similarities with narcissism and borderlines, a lot of them don't have friends because they somehow sabotage their interpersonal relationships. It makes it very difficult for both of these people to maintain intimate relationships throughout their life. They're very unstable when it comes to relationships, and that's why a lot of times you'll notice that both these people, for whatever reason, as charming as they may seem, don't have any friends. So the technical term for that is emotional dysregulation, which is basically a personality trait and a symptom of a mental illness. When someone has emotional dysregulation, they're unable to really control their emotions. They become impulsive. Instead, it often feels like their emotions control them. They say that emotional dysregulation is one of the key features seen in people with borderline personality disorders. The individuals may experience rapid and intense changes in their mood suddenly. One minute they feel happy and elated, and the next they may be anxious and crying. For those with borderline personality disorder, these strong emotions can come from fear of abandonment. This is my problem with it, though. Narcissism, and I know this from personal experience, a lot of it is linked to fear of abandonment as well. It's not always the case. They say that people with narcissistic personality disorder don't have that fear of abandonment, but I know that not to be true because I know firsthand that's not always the case. Not going to say who or why, but it's not always the case. And we do know that narcissists are very impulsive as well. So we've got impulsive emotions and fear of abandonment that could be both borderline and both be narcissist, but it could be very confusing as to who we're dealing with. But there are so many similarities, that's why they say they don't know how to treat it, because you have so many similarities to one of these personality disorders, but you're just not severe enough at all times to really be diagnosed with it. Although the triggers and emotions may differ from people with NPD and BPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder, they both allow their emotions to control them in their actions a lot of times. When they get emotional, they get impulsive. When they get impulsive, they lose control. And it seems like you're dealing with a completely different person. But it makes it so confusing because both these people do this. Basically, the way I like to think about it is that the word borderline. So you're borderline a narcissist, but you're not quite there to be a narcissist, but you're on the borderline, which means you're on the line. But sometimes it could be so severe that it feels like you're at the line and you're looking over it, but you're not going to cross it emotionally or mentally. But we can't classify you as a narcissist because you haven't crossed the line. So they say one of the major differences between borderline and narcissist is related to self-image and identity. People with borderline tend to have an unstable and low self-image. They are unsure of their identity and have difficulty confidently explaining it to others. Several factors can kind of cause this, including post-trauma and validation in early years. A lot of it has to do with inconsistency in childhood, inconsistent love, earning parents' love. One day it's there, and the next day it's manipulated for you to do something, and if you don't do what they want, they take it away. Something that we could do in a different video. Fear of abandonment and rejection is huge, but this also exists with both. This is why it's so confusing. We do know that borderline people tend to be a bit more reserved and a little bit more open about their low self-esteem. Sometimes their self-image is a bit out in the open when you get to know them, that you can tell they have a little bit of a low self-image, where a lot of times narcissists are a little more arrogant about themselves, whether they feel it or not. But the problem I have with it is that I think a lot of narcissists hide the fact that they are afraid of being left. And a lot of them have a low self-image, but they put a mask on to hide it because they're too prideful to really admit it. So they both go out of their way to really try to prove themselves to people and get people to admire them and always look like they're the smartest and the best. The problem is borderlines do that too. So this is why it's so confusing. But now we're going to get into the final point, now that you understand the differences and the similarities and why it could be so confusing. Because just because someone has all these traits doesn't mean they're narcissistic or they're borderline. You really don't know. What you want to do is look at facts. If someone's mistreating you and they've got these characteristics, it doesn't matter necessarily what you think they are or what they're diagnosed as, because a lot of times people are misdiagnosed, or they could be someone's undiagnosed son or daughter. It doesn't really matter. If someone's abusing you, it's unacceptable. Regardless, don't make excuses for the people, and that's the most important thing. So I learned this when I was going through a lot. When I was trying to address my childhood, and I had seen one of the best childhood trauma therapists in the country, And she really made a connection and got me to understand and how to live, because we go through a lot of things in our childhood, right? And they're part of us forever. So sometimes we have to learn how to accept that and get past it. That's a deeper conversation as to learning how to do that. That's another video. But in any case, I was going through things in a relationship where I wasn't sure what I was dealing with. So throughout our process and getting to know me, she was pretty confident that I was dealing with a borderline. I didn't understand why, because sometimes this person was so unbelievably loving and caring and good, and in other times they were an absolute nightmare. And it made it so difficult for me to leave and exit the relationship, because one moment I'm here and the next moment I'm there. I'd rather you just be horrible forever, so at least I know you're never going to change. But when somebody goes from this side to that side, it tears you emotionally, because it gives you that hope that they're going to change. And that what makes it so hard to fester the strength to leave when it looks like someone's changing. And you go through that cycle for years just to realize they're never going to change. So this is really how she explained to me, and this is what made the most sense, and I'm going to show you. So I'm going to show you guys the pendulum model, and this is what I learned during childhood trauma therapy, right? So that's our pendulum there. That swings from left to right, okay? Now you got two extremes on this pendulum model. You got narcissistic, and you've got depressed, right? People on this side are depressed. People on this side, all the way on this side, are narcissistic. That's great. Now, we all have our days. Some of us could be depressed, and sometimes we can not have our best day and act a little narcissistic. That's completely normal. But the main thing is, most normal people come back to the middle here. All right, so that's where your normal section will be. Sometimes you get a little narcissistic, sometimes you get a little depressed, but the pendulum always ends up swinging back here. Now, with narcissistic people, they will pretty much live up in this spectrum at the top. Now, it's normal for them to come down a little bit, but they pretty much stay in that range. Difference is when they're hiding it, they can't hide it for long because it's their way of life. That's what makes the personality disorder. Depressed people, same thing. They'll spend most of the time up there, okay? But that's a different topic. But when it comes to borderline personality disorder, what ends up happening is they'll spend a lot of time in the narcissistic realm, but they're able to make a conscious effort, and their emotions are so back and forth, and this is what we learned with the technical definition, that their emotions fluctuate so much that they spend a lot of time here. So they'll fluctuate from narcissist to normal, narcissist to normal, narcissist to normal, and genuinely do it. And they don't even mean that they're doing it. So one day you're going to deal with them here, maybe for a couple weeks, and then you guys have at it and you threaten to leave, and they genuinely want to make changes. But remember, when we're talking about personality disorders and mental illnesses, these people don't have control over themselves for the most time, and they don't think there's anything wrong with them. They're genuinely trying sometimes they're not. All depends on the case. I'm not making excuses for them, guys. I'm just trying to put it out there. They fall back into the normal realm. But this is my main point for the video as to why I think that people with borderline personality disorder, not in all cases, and I'm not talking about abuse, I'm talking about potentially. I know narcissists can be very dangerous and very abusive. That's not what I mean. I mean, when it comes to all of the things that we discussed in this pendulum and what I've been through, people with borderline personality disorder can potentially be much more dangerous in a relationship. Why? Because when they swing from one section to the other, half the time they're narcissistic and half the time it seems like they're great, it makes it very confusing for you emotionally, and it tears you. Because when you love somebody, you want it to work. You want to see things change. You want them to treat you properly. So when you fester up and the window's open and you're about to jump out and all of a sudden this person seems like they've turned a new leaf, it makes you question whether you should give them another chance or not. Things are good for a little while, and then they go right back to where they were on the other side, back to the narcissistic side, borderline, right? Starts all over again. Cycle gets deeper and deeper every single time. But with a narcissist, the swing isn't as extreme. They get a little better, but it's usually very temporary, and it's usually not that big of a change. You can usually sense the BS, you know what I mean? With borderline, it's almost like they're genuinely trying for a short period of time, and then out of nowhere, they just completely go back to the way they were, and you're like, what happened? You know, what happened to you? Are you okay? And you don't understand it because it's like an illness, but from my experience, it makes it much more difficult to leave a situation because it gives you that hope every time, Because when you see someone behaving a certain way, you're like, they're capable of changing. But then it turns into, well, why don't you just change? But then we start to realize with these personality disorders, they can't change. This is just part of them. And when you understand that this is a part of them, you have to make that decision. Well, are you going to deal with this for the rest of your life? Or are you going to pick up and move on because that's what you need to do for yourself to be your best self, if that makes sense. Not sure if any of you guys have dealt with any of this stuff before. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. Some of you have been so great about telling your story on some of the other videos. I really, really do appreciate it. Insights are always appreciated. Ideas for more videos, questions, like, comment, subscribe if you want to so you don't miss any other content. Always appreciate you guys for watching this video. Hope it was helpful. Check you on the next one.